Yes, sir. I was wanting to know if you actually knowed what the Ohio ballot initiative was about, and they actually have 10 people on there slated to take care of the whole state of Ohio, and all the profits from them is only going to be spread in between them 10 people. See, that's more like a cartel going on. And I was wanting to know if your organization actually knowed about that and could actually spread the word a little bit.
Bill, thanks for your call. Yes, the Ohio initiative is actually one of the most controversial initiatives that has come up so far, barring some odd event in policy. And so, what currently getting signatures on petitions to get them to
All right, so I just want to say a couple things about this real quick. I have a lot more to say about marijuana in the future, but right now I thought this video was interesting. I missed the first few minutes of phone calls. Very sorry about that. It seemed like the phone calls were the best part. But I think it's really important that when you have a recreational legalization of marijuana in your state, that you are allowed to grow your own marijuana. You're allowed to put a seed in the soil and reap the benefits as nature intended. And that if they don't do that, that they're not really legalizing marijuana. Now, the other thing was there's a caller who was talking about taking the money away from the gangs and criminal organizations, and that's the biggest part of the whole drug war. Is what you've done, what the federal government has done, is they've taken and funneled massive amounts of money to unscrupulous people, and this is the reason that there's a gun problem on the streets, because these people are like, no, we own this territory, and you know, this is where we sell our drugs. You're not allowed. Blah, 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 you know, blood, red, blue, whatever. I don't know. I don't want to know. But this is the reason that there's a gun problem on the streets of America, is because of the drug war, and the funneling of massive amounts of money to unscrupulous people. And that's the most important part. And it's not just that. Included in the unscrupulous people would be cops, and and when you legalize the marijuana, you take a lot of power away from the cops, and I think that's probably one of the most important things you can possibly do, is give the people back their freedom and take away power from the police, because the police are a threat to us all. Anytime we have to interact with the police these days, we know any of us could be shot on a moment's notice. And the last thing, you know, they need to be fucking with us for is weed. Okay, and one more thing about this video is the hostess of the call-in show, Washington Journal, it's a very good show. She sounds like she's taking fat dabs whenever she's off camera. She's just like like every time she goes off camera, it sounds like she's taking a big fat dab, and then so I just wanted to point that out. I found that quite hilarious. Feel bad for you, honey. You should get a lozenge or something. Anyways, I felt bad for the guy sitting next to her. I would be like, I gotta not be in this room right now. But anyways, I digress. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your support, and there's more to say. Stay cool. One of these days, this drug war is going to end, when you decide that it's a bigger threat to your children than the drugs themselves. And you got to figure it out.
Created like propaganda films like Reefer Madness to make white women afraid of black men, And it was all nasty propaganda that was designed to turn the public against the use of hemp and cannabis products.
Kara, what would you say to those who argue that legalizing marijuana is just the beginning of legalizing all drugs? If you legalize marijuana, what's the argument against legalizing heroin or cocaine or some of the perhaps more serious drugs?
What I'm saying is that this through the propaganda from the industrialists in the early 20th century was what made it illegal in the first place, and they devastated the pharmaceutical community. Anyone can look this up. All you have to do is Google marijuana DuPont, and the stories come up, and this is how the hemp plant, which has so many advantages to the world, has been completely outlawed in this country.
Kara from Florida. Our next caller is Bob from Newtown, Pennsylvania. Bob, go ahead. You say you're not sure how you feel about recreational pot.
Well, there's two sides to me. The business side, I'm all for it because I'm a day trader, and I started buying marijuana stocks, and I ended up quitting my job. I'm in my 30s, and I'm very well off. I mean, I'm over a couple $1 million already.
You said you're trading I'm sorry, you said you're trading marijuana stocks. There are companies, cannabis companies, that are publicly traded?
Yes, and in fact, it's nice for once to make money off potheads. Be the other way around, and so that part of me is wonderful. I mean, I paid off my house, my parents' house, and the part that's against it is the driving part, because I don't like the accidents and the people on the road being stoned. So I went out and I bought a brand new, real big Cadillac Escalade in case I do get smashed. But the business side of me really loves the money that I'm making out of it, and I think everybody listening should be for it on the business side, and everybody do something for yourselves and get up out of poverty. I mean, this is wonderful, I think. Bob,
as an investor, where do you see sort of the future of the business headed? Do you think that this is something that will spread to all 50 states? We just saw some stills of different types of cannabis products, food, people including marijuana products and food. Where do you see some of the investment opportunities?
Well, I think it's going to keep going because, let's face it, that's why I'm a Republican, but I love the Democrats because they love to spend money. So you can actually make money when Democrats are in office by trading what they're like. For example, Obama's wife, Michelle, with the school lunch program. When she changed all that, I started buying some good food stocks, and I made a ton of money on that too. But I think cannabis is going to go. It's going to get in food, and especially with legal like cigarettes, like Philip Morris and all them, they're already making packaging ready to go to put in machines. So it's really good to get on. It's like ground floor opportunity, like with prohibition. People that get in there early, they're very well off. Look at the Kennedys. They bought in the scotch. They own all the scotch that's made.
All right, that's Bob from Newtown, Pennsylvania, and a little more information for you here on the types of pot stocks. This is from Investopedia. The website shows that there are about 80 pot stocks in all, including AeroGrow International and Zoned Properties, Inc., according to marijuanastocks.com. The sites say that list may not be complete. The closest thing to a blue chip is GW Pharmaceuticals, which uses the active ingredients in the cannabis plant to synthesize more conventional-looking drugs for multiple sclerosis and is working on other diseases. The 17-year-old company is based in England. Its shares are up almost 50% in the last year, and its market cap is $1.5 billion. Our next caller is Kimberly from Washington, Pennsylvania, in support of legalizing recreational marijuana. Kimberly, go ahead.
Good morning. I am 100% behind legalizing recreational marijuana through the whole country. That would eliminate all the cross-state problems, people not recognizing other states' laws and all that. Plus, I've used it myself, okay, when I was going through, therapy for breast cancer and all that, it helped me maintain all the way through. But because of my job, I had to quit. And I'll tell you this, I've quit marijuana before. It's easy. It's easy. Smoking cigarettes, that is the hardest thing to do. And they compare that to a heroin addiction, nicotine addiction. So why it's not legal, I don't know. Why Pennsylvania hasn't made them. And as far as people driving, we have had potheads on the road for years, old heads. And there are not. I mean, these people don't know. You are a lot slower, more paranoid, a lot more careful. These people that smoke till they're passed out, they're not just smoking marijuana. They have to be lacing that stuff because weed does not do that to you.
So, Kimberly, can you explain a little bit the times that you have smoked marijuana? Did you feel like you were able to maintain control over your cognitive functions?
Every bit of it. The only thing I couldn't control was my appetite. You know?
All right, Kimberly from Washington, Pennsylvania. Next up is Terry from Lafayette, Indiana. Terry, you're also in support of legalizing recreational pot.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, tell us your thoughts.
Well, one thought is it's the #1 selling illegal drug in the world. You break up 99% of your gangs by legalizing that. They said in the newspaper that Colorado, the murder and crime has gone down there, and all those millions of dollars before were just going to gangs. Now the government's making tax money from it. And I'm an alcoholic. I've not drank in over 20 years. But when I did drink, I wrecked my car. I beat people up. I got beat up. And I was the one that started to trouble myself from being drunk. But using marijuana, I don't want to fight. And it got me away from drinking alcohol. God bless marijuana. And in my King James Bible, the very first page of it, God give us these seed-producing plants for us to use. That's supposed to be above man's law. Man's law has got millions in the prisons, more people locked up than any other country in the world, and probably a big percentage of them as marijuana users.
All right, Terry from Lafayette, Indiana, we hear you this morning. A few more headlines for you now. We'll still be taking your calls. Veterans Affairs official overseeing backlog of claims resigns. This article was in the New York Times this morning. The story reports that the administrator, Allison A. Hickey, became Undersecretary for Benefits in 2011, overseeing 20,000 employees and benefits for more than 12 million veterans and their families. During her tenure, she emphasized a changeover from paper to digital claims, and the backlog and pending benefits claims declined from about 611,000 in March 2013 to about 75,000 cases this week. The story goes on to say that Ms. Hickey, a former Air Force Brigadier General, had long been a contentious figure. The department's own Inspector General's office questioned the reliability of reports of a shrinking backlog, and veterans groups called for her removal. She was facing a new congressional inquiry this month into accusations that executives at her office used their positions to create plush jobs for themselves and bilked the government of thousands of dollars in moving expenses. Meanwhile, in the Wall Street Journal, Angela Merkel faces a near revolt over migrants. The report says that German leaders' conservative allies call her out for an open-door policy, saying, "You have failed." Mrs. Merkel's decision last month to open the borders to hundreds of thousands of migrants from the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Africa has put her on a collision course with many in her party, presenting the seemingly invulnerable German leader with one of her toughest political challenges since she rose to power a decade ago. Ms. Merkel's approval ratings, high and stable for most of her 3 years, fell to a 4-year low of 54% this month, according to public broadcaster ARD's Deutschland Trends survey, 9 percentage points below her standing last month. Analysts are asking whether one of the world's most powerful women has lost her Midas touch. And also this weekend, we will be exploring the history and life of Buffalo, New York, as part of our C-SPAN Cities book tour on Book TV and American History TV. Coming up today at 6 p.m. on C-SPAN 2's Book TV, we'll be featuring all of our Buffalo literary programming, including an interview with the authors of Go Tell Michelle, African-American Women Write to the New First Lady.
Well, the book is a compilation of 100 letters that were written to Michelle Obama from African-American and African, actually Caribbean women in 2009. And the letters were written to express encouragement and support for Michelle. At the time, was after the election. It had been a very grueling election, as you may know, very difficult for Mrs. Obama and the president, but also very, very exciting in that we had our first African-American president and our first African-American First Lady.
We thought it was important to be able to give other women a chance to express their ideas. We were expressing our ideas, and we thought that perhaps there was a group of women out there who may not have had access, and perhaps we could facilitate that for them. And we were right.
Our question for you this morning is whether or not you think recreational pot should be legalized. We have a few more moments to get your calls in. We'll also be talking about this issue later on in the show, so if you don't get in now, you can call back then. Our next caller will come from Mountain Home, North Carolina, and that will be Tom. Tom, you say you're not sure whether or not recreational pot should be legalized.
Well, first of all, I'm a Vietnam-era veteran, and because of multiple exposures to Agent Orange, I've lost my right leg below the knee and my left foot. Now, throughout my life, I've been in law enforcement several times, and I was totally against marijuana. But lately, because of medical marijuana usage, about 2 years ago, a friend of mine talked me into using marijuana. I took 5 puffs off of it, and the pain was gone. My right leg, over 3.5 years now, my right leg has spasms that are extreme, and it's like getting hooked up to Duke Power, and the voltage ramps up and goes into my head, and it causes me to jerk. But when I took 5 puffs of marijuana, that stopped, and I laid down and slept for 6 hours. I went to the VA and asked my doctor if I could get a prescription for medical marijuana, and I was told no, I cannot in North Carolina because it has not been approved for that. It only got approved this year for use in terminal cancer patients and glaucoma. Myself, I take on a daily basis. I get a combination of morphine and morphine, oxycodone, 2 other drugs, baclofen and gabapentin, and none of those are working. And yet I can't, because North Carolina approved marijuana this year for use by cancer and glaucoma patients, but not for mine. So I can't get it. I'm also told that if I use it recreationally and it shows up in my blood work that I have to take every 3 months, that they can't issue any kind of painkillers because they're afraid that I might mix the drugs into marijuana. I wouldn't be that stupid myself.
All right, Tom. Tom from North Carolina, we hear you this morning. Next caller is Katrina from Goshen, Indiana, calling in support of legalizing recreational pot. Katrina, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. Yes, I'm totally for. I'm sorry, I can't hear you now.
You're on the air. Turn down your TV if it's on.
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to say I'm totally for it because I have had numerous family members that have died that could have used a marijuana for the effects of eating or, helping them eat and through their times of chemo and whatnot.
All right, Katrina from Indiana. Our next caller is Patsy from Ottawa, Ohio, calling in opposition to legalizing recreational pot. Patsy, why do you feel that way?
I oppose it 100%. I'm for medical marijuana, but when I used pot, I didn't have a good judgment while driving. I was stymied in my thinking abilities. I would laugh outrageously at any little thing. I thought everything was funny. I slept a lot, and I ate quite a bit, which would cause a lot of overweight, I believe. in America, and I believe that a lot of countries would look at us, and if we all acted like the way I had acted, then they would look at us as, oh, we have a stoned America.
All right, Patsy from Ohio, we hear you as well this morning. And our last caller for this segment this morning, that we will be revisiting this issue later on in the program. Our next caller is Peter from Rockville, Maryland, in support of legalizing pot. Peter, you have the last word. What do you think?
Well, legalization is clear that marijuana is not harmful, certainly not as harmful as alcohol, but there's some caveats. There needs to be a cap on the age, because younger people smoking it can seriously affect their problem-solving skills that they learn in high school, and that should be terribly not allowed for that age group. Medical marijuana in Maryland, it was passed. However, their doctors can prescribe it, but there's no place in Maryland where they can purchase it for distribution for even medical marijuana. So there's still some problems organizing the federal, state, and levels of use, and there needs to be some action by the federal government to facilitate those things.
Washington Journal continues.
Up next, we are talking about whether or not marijuana should be legalized for recreational use. Our guest is John Hudak. He is a Governance Studies Fellow at the Brookings Institution. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, John Hudak, can you start by telling us a little bit about what you study in your area of expertise and how marijuana policy legislation fits into that?
So, to be honest, a lot of my research is on the dry and boring side. I look at bureaucratic process. I look at how institutions of government work to deliver public policy to citizens. And along the way, I saw Colorado and Washington legalizing marijuana, and I thought, you know, this might be a new policy area to apply some of the questions that I normally ask in a different format. And so that brought me to looking at how the states are rolling out marijuana legalization.
And do you have a stance on whether or not marijuana should be legal either for medicinal or recreational uses?
So in my work, I take this position that states are legalizing and that citizens and residents of states want it legal. And so government should do what the citizenry wants, and that is work effectively and deliver public policy in the way that it's supposed to. So I'm in favor of good government when it comes to marijuana.
We showed a chart earlier this morning when we had open phone lines on whether or not people support or oppose the legalization of recreational marijuana. We showed this chart from the Pew Research Center that showed that 53% of Americans support legalizing marijuana in some form or another, compared to 44% of Americans who think it should be illegal. And you can really see since about 1990 how much support for legalizing marijuana has grown. What's behind this really sea change in how Americans view pot?
Well, you're right. What's most important about that chart is not even so much the numbers as they stand now, but the trend line in those numbers. There's little evidence to think that that trend is going to reverse, barring some odd event in policy. And so what's important to note is why these changes are happening. Part of it is just demographic shifts within the United States. We're seeing, some of the most ardent opponents of marijuana legalization, what political scientists like me call exiting the electorate. They're dying off. And the people entering the electorate, coming of voting age, are some of the strongest supporters of legalization policy. And so those two forces happening at the same time can cause dramatic effects in public opinion. At the same time, people are observing states that are legalizing and seeing that the sky isn't falling, that disasters aren't happening in broad terms. And they were a little bit skeptical of marijuana before, and they're moving a little bit in their opinions as well.
Well, we've seen Oregon just this month becoming the latest state to legalize recreational use of pot. Where do you see the possibility for legalization going forward? Where are the next states that we might see make a move?
So there are states that are planning ballot initiatives in the coming years already. One is Ohio. Ohio is going to vote on recreational marijuana in November. Nevada will be having a referendum in 2016. And those states are going to be the next immediate sure battlegrounds. But there are other states as well that are looking to run initiatives. They're currently getting signatures on petitions to get them to their citizens to be able to vote on it. And so we see states like Arizona, California, who are looking to put ballot initiatives up in 2016. States like Florida are considering medical marijuana initiatives in the coming years. And there are advocacy organizations across the U.S. who are trying to do this in liberal states like Massachusetts and states that you wouldn't think of, like the Dakotas, for instance. So these efforts are happening really nationwide.
And you can join our conversation as well with a question or comment for John Hudak from the Brookings Institution. If you support marijuana being legal for recreational use, you can call us at 202-748-8000. If you oppose the legalization of recreational pot, you can call us at 202-748-8001. If you're not sure how you feel, dial us at 202-748-8002. You can also find us on social media. We're on Twitter. The handle is at CSPANWJ. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/CSPAN. And you can send us an email at journal@c-span.org. John Hudak from the Brookings Institution, I'd like to read to you this op-ed that ran in the LA Times, written by William Bennett, the nation's first drug czar and former education secretary. He said that the argument for legalizing pot is really looking at marijuana as a gateway drug. Here's what he wrote. There is no argument against the legal barring of marijuana that does not also apply to heroin, cocaine, and meth. That is why some of the more honest proponents in the legalization movement will admit that marijuana legalization is but a first step toward the legalization of all drugs. Do you agree with his statement?
No, that's actually a very foolish statement on behalf of Mr. Bennett. The reality is that there are a variety of reasons that individuals want to legalize marijuana. For some people, it's for medical value. For some people, it's a matter of liberty. For some people, it's a matter of criminal justice. They've seen what marijuana arrests have done to their community. This is particularly true among communities of color. For some people, they just see it as pure recreation, and they want access to that drug for recreation. The idea that this is a gateway to broader legalization is something that opponents of legalization certainly trumpet, but the reality is that public opinion is not behind the legalization of heroin. It's not behind the legalization of cocaine. But as you showed with your Pew poll, in many places it is strongly in favor of legalization of marijuana. And so the idea that this is some effort by an advocacy community to shift public opinion, I can't imagine an advocacy community that has the power to shift public opinion on the legalization of heroin. It is so unpopular. It's more unpopular than our Congress, for instance, which is pretty hard.
Another important issue is looking at where the money from sales of marijuana actually goes. So we mentioned earlier in the program that Oregon, since it has legalized recreational marijuana use, that they've seen $11 million or so in sales. Where is the state using that money? Is it going to fund things like education, et cetera?
So a lot of the states that have legalized are using that revenue, that tax revenue from marijuana in similar ways. One of the primary ones is for school construction. In Oregon, just like in Colorado, about 40% of the revenue collected by legal marijuana sales goes to build schools or build additions on schools throughout the state. Other uses of the funds are for education, drug prevention education, for mental health and addiction services, to fund the enforcement divisions within these states that are actually charged with carrying out the law. Some of the money goes for law enforcement and law enforcement training. So while the money may come from what some people consider a vice, the tax revenue is actually being applied in areas that people consider pretty virtuous.
We'll turn now to the phone lines. Our first caller for this segment is Ginny from Lancaster, Ohio, who opposes the legalization of marijuana. Ginny, what's your thought this morning?
Hello, good morning. I didn't hear you say something that buzzed.
I said, what's your comment or question this morning, Ginny?
Oh, I don't think we need to legalize it. I'm against it. I know somebody that smokes it, and they sit there and stare off into space for about 6 hours, and I don't see how that's going to help somebody.
So, Jimmy, thanks for your call. I think this is one of the legitimate concerns that exist about the legalization effort. That is, what is it going to do for society? What effects is it going to have on society, on users, on individuals? But the reality, I think, within your question is an important one, and that is that you know someone who's using marijuana and that person is having a time with it that perhaps takes away who they truly are. But the reality is that marijuana exists. People are using it every day. They're using it in your community. They're using it in communities across the United States. And so many in the advocacy community argue that because this exists, it's better that we regulate it, that we control it, that we make sure that people know what they're getting, and we get some tax revenue out of it because it's here and it hasn't gone away. So we may as well do something about it. That's a claim that I think is a pretty convincing one from advocates.
Next up is Bill from Otway, Ohio, calling in support of legalizing marijuana. Bill, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I was wanting to know if you actually knowed what the Ohio ballot initiative was about, and they actually have 10 people on there slated to take care of the whole state of Ohio, and all the profits from them is only going to be spread in between them 10 people. See, that's more like a cartel going on. And I was wanting to know if your organization actually knowed about that and could actually spread the word a little bit.
Bill, thanks for your call. Yes, the Ohio initiative is actually one of the most controversial initiatives that has come up so far for exactly the reasons that you list. The way that the legalization initiative works in Ohio, the one that will be on the ballot this year, is that it would allow marijuana to be grown by 10 individual operators, and those 10 operators would then supply marijuana for the entire state of Ohio. And you're exactly right, it creates a cartel. This is controversial not just between opponents and supporters of marijuana, but it's created a real division within the marijuana advocacy community over whether this is the right form of reform, frankly. And my colleague Phil Wallach at the Brookings Institution, he's a native Ohioan, and he's written a bit on this ballot initiative in particular. And so I encourage you to read Brookings' FixGov blog, where his work is featured particularly on this topic.
I think that's a really interesting point, which is, in the states where at least some form of marijuana is legal, what are the implementation challenges? We hear businesses talking about the challenge of storing their money in terms of what do they do, the relationship with banks, because it's still illegal on the federal level to deal in marijuana.
The implementation challenges for any public policy are difficult. For marijuana policy, they are truly profound. A lot of people think of legalization as black and white, as an on-off switch. Either it's legal or it's not. But the reality is that legalization is such a complex and diverse policy outcome that can take many different forms. And we've seen that in the states that have legalized so far. Every system looks a little different. There have to be concerns about diversion. That is, whether product is getting outside of the legal market and going into the illegal market. How revenue is collected, tax revenue or business revenue. Access to banking and other financial institutions is an important question. How you create a system that prevents youth from getting marijuana. How you protect public health and public safety. How you educate children, how you educate users. These are just a few of the questions that state officials have to entertain when they're building a legalization system. And I think oftentimes people underappreciate how big of a challenge officials in Colorado, in Washington, in Alaska, in Oregon, in the District of Columbia, and in future states, what they're facing. It's a tremendous haul.
Next up is Ollie from Euclid, Ohio. Lots of callers from Ohio today. Not sure how Ollie feels about supporting legalized marijuana. Ollie, what do you think?
Well, at the point, listen to what you were saying, it kind of got me thinking. Maybe this is one way, like those say, you can't beat them, join them. To legalize the marijuana, it's just like I know they made a study about the medical. It may help certain people in that way, but at the same time, it may help the government too, because now they're finding how they can get more money into the revenue. And they keep saying they're using the money for the schools. But what I'm seeing not too many schools is getting that money to help to educate the kids or to make a better school for all kids around in the state of Ohio. So I sometimes wonder if that money really is going to be used to help the people.
Sorry about that, Ollie. I inadvertently cut you off there as I was trying to cough, but John Hudak, go ahead with your response.
Sure. So Ollie, apologies for the cutoff there, but let me try to answer your question. It's an important one. In the states that have legalized marijuana, the money is going to school construction, and the manner in which tax revenue is first delivered to the regulatory agencies and then distributed throughout the states, there are very tight accounting practices of how that money is distributed. And so when you go to Colorado, when you go to Washington, you're actually seeing this money put to work. But the reality is this, and it's one that I think not many people talk about. The amount of revenue being collected from marijuana sales is impressive if you look at the sheer number, but it's not so huge when you look at what schools across the United States need, whether it's the addition to an existing school, whether it's the construction of a new school, or whether it's the variety of needs that the American education system it really has a hunger for right now. Marijuana is not going to solve an educational crisis in the United States, and I don't think most advocates sell it in that way. But the reality is that if you have the choice between tens of millions of dollars of new revenue for the construction of a school or that revenue remaining with criminal organizations, I think that's probably an easier call for most voters. You might not see a school being built in your city, but there will be schools built across the states that do use marijuana revenue for that purpose.
And how successful have the states that have legalized marijuana in some form been at eliminating the black market? We've seen reports that show the black market is still alive and well because legalized marijuana costs so much more than the, I guess, street value of marijuana.
Yeah, that's first a hard answer because we don't have a ton of data yet. When you think about even the states that legalized recreational marijuana first, Colorado and Washington, sales weren't happening in Colorado until 2014. They weren't happening in Washington until a few months later in 2014. And so understanding how this effort has displaced the black market, it's still a little early to tell that. The reality is that we can be sure that some people are purchasing from the white market, the legal market rather than the illegal market. But at the same time, when you look at it, for instance, Colorado had a $100 million month in sales recently in legal marijuana. That tells you something is happening with the black market. But you're right, prices are high. People are still a little bit uncomfortable with the system in certain areas. The other reality is that municipalities in Colorado and in other states that have legalized can opt out of the system, making recreational marijuana illegal in those cities still, except for home grows where they're available. And that means that in some places, the black market is still the closest, best bet for you to get your marijuana.
I mean, it sounds like it's very similar to how there are some dry counties within states that allow alcohol sales overall.
Exactly.
Next up is Mike, also from Ohio. He's from Doylestown, calling in opposition to legalize marijuana. Mike, why is that?
I'm a 60-some-year-old man. I've been smoking marijuana since I've been 15 years old, and I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs from it. I've lost a couple of jobs because of it. I haven't gotten a couple of jobs because of it, good paying jobs. And that ain't going to change. People who smoke pot are still going to lose jobs. And if you really want to help people who just want to smoke pot, legalize it for the individual grower. Not all these big organizations that's going to make millions of dollars on the backs of poor people who really can't afford to smoke pot anyway. That's my comment, and that's my concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. You actually bring up a point that is an important policy issue that people in the community, in the advocacy community, are talking about, and that is labor law around marijuana use. Some argue that if marijuana is legal, then individuals at a company should be able to use it on their own time and not be punished for it in the way that most companies allow the use of alcohol on your own time. As long as you don't show up drunk to work, you can have a martini at night or you can have a beer at night. Marijuana is a bit different. It is still a Schedule I drug according to the Controlled Substances Act, a federal law. And as a result of that, there is no labor protection for individuals who test positive for marijuana use. And easier to test for the closeness of the use of alcohol than it is for how recently you used marijuana. And so even to create tests for companies to judge for this is difficult. There was a recent case in Colorado called Coates v. Dish Network, where a medical marijuana user was fired from his job for testing positive for use of marijuana. And recently the Colorado Supreme Court upheld the company's ability to fire him because they have a drug-free workplace policy, and that continues to stand.
Next up is Paul from Athens, Tennessee, in opposition to legalizing marijuana as well. Paul, go ahead.
Yes, it seems odd that the people that want to legalize marijuana are the same people that want to restrict things that our kids want to eat in the school that they enjoy. We can have marijuana, but we can't have pizza. And it seems strange, too. If marijuana is so good for you, can you have it at age 11, 13, 6? Well, who said, is it just coincidental? It's 18 years old or 21 years old, the same as other dates that we have crafted in law.
So Paul, yes, your correction on the age restriction was an important one. In the states that have legalized, 21 is the age that you can purchase recreational marijuana. One thing I would also correct, though, is that no one in the advocacy community, the marijuana advocacy community, at least the people who I talk to, would argue that recreational marijuana is such a good thing. What they're arguing is that people should be able to make their own decisions over it in the same way that they do with alcohol or tobacco or other products. There are people in the medical marijuana community who argue that there are medicinal benefits, that there are positive benefits for the use of marijuana. But you're hard-pressed to find advocates who want recreational marijuana because they think it's bringing serious benefits to a user. They just think, they would argue that if you can control it, if you can regulate it, and if you can give people the freedom of their choice, then that's better than prohibition. That's at least the argument in the advocacy community.
In the states that have legalized marijuana, are there restrictions around use, such as I guess it would be blood alcohol content or blood content when you are driving, for example? We heard a lot of callers talk about the concern of people being stoned behind the wheel, where you can smoke it or ingest it. What are you finding? How are states handling this?
Yeah, states are handling that in pretty similar ways. You can't use in public in the states that have legalized. So public means a park, it means a restaurant, it means a bar or a club. You can't do that. You can't use and operate a motor vehicle. You can't
at all.
And you can't have in some places you can't have open containers. Essentially, you can't have marijuana exposed within a motor vehicle. You have to be 21. In many places, you have to purchase it from a state-sanctioned dispensary, except in places where you can grow your own, and then there are limitations around that. There are limitations around where you can grow it, whether it can be publicly viewed, what kinds of security there has to be. There are a lot of restrictions about use, and also sales as well. So you can't sell within a certain distance of a school. In some places you can't use within a certain distance of a school. And so there are states are very serious about making sure that you don't see and smell marijuana everywhere you go. That said, if you've taken a trip to Denver or Seattle, it's not uncommon to walk down the street and smell the scent of marijuana.
Next up is Chris from Los Angeles, California, calling in support of legalizing marijuana. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. I know you've already hit on this, but my real concern is the hypocrisy of society over marijuana and alcohol. Alcohol being extremely physically addictive. Marijuana is not physically addictive. I know from my own personal experience, like the gentleman, the 67-year-old that called a little bit earlier, I am in that age range as well and have been smoking for over 40 years. And I know that it's not physically addictive because I've stopped for times. And my brother, who was an alcoholic, was extremely affected by that. I just don't understand why marijuana is classified as a Class A narcotic. That's just it's ridiculous.
Well, Chris, thanks for your call. The relationship between, or the perspective between alcohol and marijuana is a really interesting one. I spoke to a regulator in a state that legalized once, and that individual said, you know, our ballot initiative wanted to legalize marijuana or regulate marijuana like alcohol. And it raises an interesting question, because I don't think anyone looks around our alcohol regulatory systems in the United States and think, yeah, we've really nailed it. We've got it right. But for a lot of people, that's the type of model, or that's the type of crutch that people can use to understand how you regulate a vice. This individual had a really great line, and they said, you know, down the road, 10 years from now, I don't want to talk about regulating marijuana like alcohol. I want the conversation to change to regulate alcohol like marijuana, because we're regulating it so well. And I think whether you believe that or not, it leaves open this idea that perhaps as we're building marijuana regulatory schemes throughout the United States, maybe we can also look at what's going on in alcohol and try to improve the regulation around that as well.
Next up is Jerry from Pearland, Texas. Jerry, you're not sure how you feel about legalizing marijuana. Why is that?
Well, I'm unsure. I'm in favor of having it used. However, but when it comes to the U.S. Department of Commerce, how is the Commerce Department going to start regulating it once multiple states get involved and start selling inside their own state lines? Sooner or later, they're going to want to distribute it across state lines. So how would the U.S. Commerce Department get involved? And I have another question. When it comes, what about the product of hemp, which is also a marijuana-type plant? How would that? What is your feelings on the Brookington Institute feelings towards hemp use and hemp production here in the United States? Now I hang up and wait on your call.
Well, Jerry, thanks for your call. The question about what the federal government is going to do is an open one. Your question about what the Commerce Department will do might not be dead on, because marijuana regulation in the United States occurs through an abundance of federal agencies. Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice, and elsewhere all play a role in marijuana regulation. And if marijuana were to be legalized federally, or if there were to be some sort of federal reform around marijuana, it would need to affect a number of federal agencies and how they would respond. And those are huge administrative hurdles that the marijuana industry sees every day in states that have legalized, and ones that advocates really on both sides of the issue focus on and think about as they're moving forward. It's not right now, because marijuana is a Schedule I substance. It cannot move legally across state lines. So even two states that border, like Oregon and Washington, you cannot buy marijuana in Oregon and bring it to Washington State, because it violates federal law, and that's considered interstate commerce. As we move forward and pressure grows among the states for a federal response to happen, it will be interesting to see exactly what Congress does and exactly what federal agencies do to address this growing problem.
We're talking with John Hudak from the Brookings Institution. Earlier this week at the first Democratic debate on CNN, both Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sort of addressed this issue of whether or not they would be in favor of legalizing marijuana. Here's what they had to say.
I suspect I would vote yes. And I would vote yes because I am seeing in this country too many lives being destroyed for nonviolent offenses. We have a criminal justice system that lets CEOs on Wall Street walk away, and yet we are imprisoning or giving jail sentences to young people who are smoking marijuana.
No. I think that we have the opportunity through the states that are pursuing recreational marijuana to find out a lot more than we know today. I do support the use of medical marijuana, and I think even there we need to do a lot more research so that we know exactly how we're going to help people for whom medical marijuana provides relief. So I think we're just at the beginning.
And just to be clear, Senator Bernie Sanders was talking about whether or not he would support legalization in Nevada, whereas Hillary Clinton was talking about supporting the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana. We're talking with John Hudak from the Brookings Institution. What's your thoughts on how the candidates are addressing this topic, and are you hearing any similar discussion on the Republican side?
Well, I think both candidates' answers left a little bit to be desired. They weren't really complete answers. What Senator Sanders said was that if he were a Nevada voter, he would probably vote to legalize marijuana. That doesn't tell us how he would vote as a United States Senator. It doesn't tell us what he would do as president. And I think he had the opportunity there to answer in that way, and he clearly fell short. But he did engage a lot of important issues, and so did Secretary Clinton. That is, the criminal justice aspects of it, the equal treatment aspects of it, and in Clinton's case, the medical research aspects of it. These are all issues that can be addressed by federal reform, and ones that I think the Obama administration has started down that road. And what Secretary Clinton suggests is that she would continue the status quo that the Obama administration has, allowing states that have legalized recreationally to continue and to learn about what those public policies can do, and allow medical marijuana states to do this, but to expand research. My colleague at Brookings, Grace Wallach, and I have a paper coming out on Tuesday that looks exactly at this question of medical research. We ask, how does the federal government stymie research into medical marijuana, and what kinds of implications for public health and public policy that has? And the reality is that the federal government, despite allowing states to dispense medical marijuana, funds very little research, clinical research, into what marijuana can do in a medical or a pharmaceutical way. And those are the types of changes that a lot of candidates on both the Democratic side and the Republican side, like Rand Paul, are really calling for.
And what happens if the next president, whoever's elected in 2016, does not support the legalization of marijuana? Could we see some challenges to the states that have already pushed this measure forward?
I think you can see some challenges. Most of them will be legal challenges. Chris Christie is one of the most outspoken opponents to the federal system, this federal sort of hands-off system that exists. His answers are a little bit more cowboy and a little less presidential than the realities of it. He would probably file lawsuits to try to enjoin, to try to stop these systems from happening. But the reality is that we have medical marijuana in violation of the Controlled Substances Act, operating in 23 states in the District of Columbia. We have 4 states in the District of Columbia that allow recreational marijuana, and by the time the next president is sworn in, there will probably be more states in both categories. The ability of the DEA and the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies to go into these states and shut everything down is tough in any system, particularly in a system where Congress is addicted to budget cuts. And so the ability of a president to physically shut something down is quite limited. And so you have to listen to words from candidates like Chris Christie and take them with a grain of salt. But the legal aspect, the litigation aspect of it, would be much more challenging for state leaders who are actually implementing the systems.
Next up, Carl is calling from Erie, Pennsylvania, in opposition to legalized marijuana. Carl, go ahead.
Yes, as far as I'm concerned, this definition of recreational marijuana is a joke. Also, what happens if the people are smoking at home and their young kids and everything else smell this, and that can get you high. And also, it's a federal crime for marijuana. I don't know how they get away with it, the states and so on. But, you know, the one time I'm going to tell you, about 40 or 50 years ago, I smoked marijuana once in my life, and I was actually going to stab my best friend. So anybody that says it's innocent is a fool. Thank you.
All right, that's Carl from Erie, Pennsylvania.
Well, Carl, I'll take two of those points. The latter is this. I think one of the real concerns that exists with black market marijuana, with marijuana where it's not legal, is that it's unclear sometimes what is in it. And so a response to smoking marijuana where you had what sounds like a psychotic episode, one where you had thoughts of homicide, is really not consistent with what we know about the effects of THC on the body. What might have happened is that you used a product that was adulterated. And many in the legalization community argue as states step in and begin regulating this product, incidents like that, where you have adulterated marijuana, where you have marijuana mixed with some other substance that has a very negative psychoactive effect or a very serious psychoactive effect in concert with THC, those things can be avoided under a regulated system in the way that they can't be, or they won't always be under an illegal system. Your second point, you asked how that smoking and using and manufacturing and distributing marijuana is illegal under federal law, and you're not sure how states get away with that. So let me describe that a little bit. You're absolutely right. The use, sale, manufacture, distribution of marijuana is illegal under the Controlled Substances Act. But the Obama administration has issued memoranda from the Department of Justice, which has taken a hands-off approach that has said in states that have passed legal marijuana measures, whether they're for recreational use or they're for medical use, or both, as long as they comply with a robust regulatory system, as long as they create that system and operators comply with it, and the system is not engaging in other bad acts like selling to children or working with drug cartels or other criminal organizations, the federal government will let them operate. If they are violating any of those provisions, the federal government has the right to step in, and they have done so even in states with legal systems so far.
All right, next up is Aaron from Erie, Pennsylvania, calling in support of legalizing marijuana. Aaron, go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah, it's odd that Carl from Erie, Pennsylvania should
Two
call
callers, right? Back to back.
Yeah, I don't know Carl. We don't run in the same circles, I would assume. But first I want to say thank you to C-SPAN and Mr. Hudak for such an informed conversation on this topic. I believe that education is the best weapon against ignorance on this. My question, Mr. Hudak, being Pennsylvania and the Ohio ballot initiative is very interesting to me, and the fact that they're only going to have a limited number of growers and suppliers happening on the ground there. My worry is when we talk about the commerce and marijuana moving across state lines, it's more about the money. Being in Pennsylvania, things move slowly here, and my worry is that other states, as they are going to be legalizing and whether recreational, medical, and making lots of money. And franchises are going to pop up, businesses are going to pop up with experience in this, and I worry that they're going to swoop into PA whenever it does become legal, and that they'll be the ones making the money and then sending the money away so that the people here in Pennsylvania, entrepreneurs here in Pennsylvania, business people here in Pennsylvania aren't going to be making the money and keeping it here. Can you tell me if they're on the states that have laws for medical and recreational, are there any stipulations saying you must be a resident of so many years in the state to open a business or to make money from it? I'm just worried that the money is going to flow away from the communities who could use the money here.
Well, Aaron, thanks for the question. Many of the states that have legalized marijuana in whatever form, recreational or medical, have dealt with this issue specifically, and that is, how do we make sure that the money is staying within the state, that the business operators are located within the state? And this is a basic public choice question. And I think Pennsylvania is a state that demographically and ideologically we could see moving in the direction of marijuana reform in the coming years. And so your question is an important one that Pennsylvania legislators or those drafting ballot initiatives or the voters themselves are going to have to grapple with. And that is, what types of safeguards do you put on, if any, about the physical location of the revenue, the money that is used to open up dispensaries or grow operations, and who in the state can open them? Many states have put in requirements that individuals operating marijuana enterprises have to be residents. They have to have residency requirements for a certain period of time, so someone can't just buy a house and open a dispensary the next day. And essentially create the shadow system in which they're able to operate franchises across the United States. That's one that advocates have really engaged. Advocates on both sides. Opponents are worried about this, and supporters of marijuana legalization are concerned about this, and it's something that ultimately ballot initiative drafters and state legislators are going to be concerned about as well.
John Hudak of the Brookings Institution, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And that concludes our program today. Join us tomorrow. We'll be talking about...
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.